Sean, what kind of coffee is that again?
It's an Ethiopian.
Love bugs.
The Love Bug.
It's an
It's a new
Ethiopian
blend.
blend.
It's so cute. I love that mug. Hey everyone, we're live a few minutes early. We're caffeinating ourselves.
As one does. This is a really fantastic Ethiopian blend from Tired Eyes.
Yes.
Anybody else excited about what they're drinking right now, coffee-wise?
Anybody else having coffee?
Anybody else having coffee?
Or
right
tea?
now?
Right now?
It's coffee time.
You do your coffee first, and then you do your cocktails. Or you could also just do coffee cocktails, and this would be the guy to talk about
Yeah,
that.
that's right. That's my day job. And my night job.
Mm-hmm. So we're gonna go officially live in a few minutes, but while we are collecting all of our friends, why don't those of you who are already here drop your name in the chat? Where are you viewing in from, and what are you currently drinking? If you're not currently drinking,
Why?
and
That was a very simple question.
when will you be? I
Yeah.
hope that will be very soon
Yeah.
with us. We are making Sazeracs today. If
So
you
excited about
have
this.
not put your glassware in the freezer,
And by glassware, when you're talking about Sazerac, two forms of glassware. Either if you have a mixing glass, do that, and in the glass you're going to put it in. If you don't have a mixing glass, that's fine. Actually, it's a real classic New Orleans way to do it. Of just taking two rocks glasses and throwing both of them in the freezer, and you can build into one and then pour into the other. So
put your rocks glasses or your rocks glass and mixing glass in the freezer. If you're planning on having more than a Sazerac of one today, then put multiple glasses in the freezer, so you just have to do it once.
pull out all your ice creams and put all your glassware in the freezer.
We did that. We went on an ice cream binge over the weekend, so I had to move all the ice cream to the other freezer. So
You
we
know,
could
you
make.
still have a whole lot of Mr. Black for that ice cream binge. You probably could have affogadoed that.
Oh, that would have been so nice.
It's all right.
It
Next
was
time.
an ice cream binge with the kids, so
Well, the adults were participating,
that's
and that's a whole lot of Mr. Black left over.
Show them the real bottle that we use.
of ice cream.
This is the
Oh.
second one in,
Oh, yeah.
in a month.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're doing just fine.
We're doing okay. We're doing okay. One of my favorite, so I used to make ice cream all the time, actually, and one of my favorite ice creams that I used to make was using different kinds of bitters, and I would use the R&D sarsaparilla bitters, which was a local
Super
bitters
vanilla-y.
company.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so good. It's like vanilla, but like boozy vanilla.
Mhm.
It was delicious. I actually like made a carton of it and then like took it to coin op
Really?
and like gave it to them. I was like, here you go,
That's awesome.
here you go, Andrews.
Never. You didn't invite me to that party.
I know. I don't know that I knew you at that point.
Probably not. Or maybe like just through like Andrews.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, all right, we've got some folks here.
Cool.
Burgeon is here again. Good evening, at least for you.
What is up?
You have everything ready for tonight's drink. You want to experience it raw, so we're gonna make it. And I'm gonna tell you, we're gonna dive straight into making the cocktail.
Yeah,
There's
we're not gonna
so
mess
much
around.
to say about the Sazerac, but we're gonna bite our tongues and make the cocktail first, so then we can talk about it while we're enjoying
That's right. Because there's so much to say about this, and most of it is true. And we definitely want to make the cocktail and have something to enjoy.
it. Hey Jamie, hey Daniel, hey John, hi Tom,
Hey,
welcome.
friends.
Daniel and Christina calling in from Austin.
Oh, awesome.
You know, it's fun. I've had a couple of people that have become members of the Cocktail Journey write in and say, we're doing this together as a couples thing.
Oh, that's cool.
You know, just like partners or husband and wife, and it's become a little thing that you guys do together. And
Awesome.
it's neat because I think that that's one of the things we love, and we actually sent out an email about our like Valentine's Day specials, and so it's neat to think about all the couples that have been enjoying cocktails in different ways now that we've been at home as opposed to going out.
Yeah. I mean,
And
I
I
feel
love to
like
hear
the
those
first. I feel like the first pandemic, we definitely went through the whole like couples making bread together and like, you know, in the kitchen, and then it turned out to be too many dishes. So, cocktails are a bit, you know, are also an awesome way to bond in the kitchen.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
So get your stuff ready. Thank you. We're officially at 4:30. For
Welcome.
those of you just joining us, Welcome to this week's live stream.
One more time.
Sorry, there's
Sean's-
there's a lot of paparazzi going today, more so than usual.
Sean's gonna be off camera for this one, but he's like floating around and popping up in weird places with this camera.
He's done all the hard work. He's placed the lighting and the camera where it belongs, and then he made us all coffee, and now he just gets to have fun.
Yep.
Right.
So, okay, without any further ado,
Let's do it.
welcome to the cocktail journey. Stefan's gonna get the stuff for making drinks. We're making the Sazerac today, and it's a beautiful cocktail. It's got a lot of good, rich history. It's got some very polarizing opinions that we probably will experience in the audience. But it's almost like the most specific of an improved whiskey cocktail. And Stefan, why don't you talk to us about the recipe?
Yeah,
I'll
let's do
put
it.
it in the chat so you guys can get started making it as well.
There you go. A trick that I learned when bartending is you use your smallest amount of ingredients first, which is the bitters. Generally, it's 4 dashes of Peychaud's. I'm actually doing 6. There's a lot of bartenders who have decided that the Peychaud's we get now is not as potent as what we had about 10 years ago. You have to be an old school bartender to even notice that difference. So for me, I need a little bit more Peychaud's, a little bit more oomph. And then we'll do a 1/4 ounce of a rich syrup, which is 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. And then we're going to get into the history of base spirit, but we're actually going to run the gamut of its full 150 plus year life by using both of the main base spirits that you would find in a Sazerac. So we'll do 1.5 ounces of brandy or cognac. This is a cognac. And then 1.5 ounces of rye whiskey.
For those of you that prepped using the recipe that we sent out earlier this week, it's totally fine to use 100% rye whiskey.
That's
which is what
actually
we
the
included.
modern Sazerac.
It's also totally fine if you want to use 100% cognac, brandy, because that was the original recipe. Some people make it also with bourbon, know that you're going to get a much sweeter drink, and there might be some purists who will say that's not a Sazerac, but you know what? Pick your poison and go to town.
I'm going to start chilling this cocktail, and I'm going to grab my other glass to absinthe rinse.
We don't like to talk over the ice stirring because we like you to experience in all the audio format the things that we miss about being in the bar. But question for you. Tom says he couldn't make it to the store and he only has 110 proof Pikesville rye.
Yep, that'll do.
Do you suggest any modifications to this recipe or is he good to go?
Just stir a little bit more. I would just stir that a little bit more because it has a higher proof. And because we're pouring into a glass that doesn't have any ice in it, just give it a little bit longer stir than you would normally.
It smells so good.
Absinthe. Gets you every time. Oh, Sazerac focus. Cool.
All right, I just dropped the specs for Stefan's recipe that we're making tonight in the chat. And you notice that he rinsed the glass with absinthe by using an atomizer that we keep on hand in our bar that's always filled with absinthe. But you can also pour a little bit of absinthe into the glass, swirl it around,
Maybe drink
discard
it.
it. I would not discard it in the sink if I were you. I would just discard it into somebody's close by mouth.
Right. Don't get it anywhere close to a lit flame.
Mm.
I like the sidecar version where they rinse your glass and serve it to you with the absinthe left over on the side.
Yeah, that's an awesome preparation for sure. You can use a really large swath of lemon peel, or if I have smaller ones, I'll usually use 2. And then here's kind of the other like really hotly contested thing is whether to actually add the lemon peel in or not. I actually, especially because I'm a photographer, I like to actually leave the lemon peel in. It just adds an extra depth to the drink. But since we're just sitting here chatting and I've put plenty of lemon oil in here, we'll just leave it as is. But this is kind of what a good Sazerac should look like. Really perspirated both with the chill from the freezer, but also with that beautiful rimming, like just coating of absinthe in the glass. And there it is. I guess I'll give it a snort if that's all right with you all.
Mm-hmm. That's all yours.
Oh man. Yep, that's perfect.
The camera wants to try it.
So this is actually side personal note. This little glass that we have here that doesn't have a huge thick bottom is Sean and Stefan's personal favorite glass for like an old-fashioned glass out of our whole collection. However, Sean and I were having a debate the other day because if you fully chilled a glass that has a thick base, it'll actually be way colder because it'll have that cold
Or it'll
menace.
stay cold for longer.
So it'll keep that drink a little.
Yeah, but you also drink with your eyes, and there's something sexy about that. Obviously, this drink is going to warm up as it sits. There's nothing you can do about that. It's part of the Sazerac experience. If you don't have an atomizer at home, I'm going to give you a quick little trick to make sure that you coat your whole glass just by adding just a touch of absinthe. And if you go to bars in New Orleans, you'll actually see it done this way, where they'll just do that. And a lot of times they'll go, Sazerac! And they do it. And that's a perfectly... and then another trick, I don't know if you noticed me pouring it in. I actually poured around. I was telling you earlier that Italians know how to pour like really like precisely. And I'm Italian American. That's where I get it from, I guess. But yeah, I actually hit all sides of the rim going in, or all sides of the glass that you're kind of coating and make sure that absinthe is not just on your nose, but actually in the drink as well. Yeah, so that's the Sazerac. I guess we should probably start talking about its history and what makes it so significant.
Yes.
Is everybody getting their drink going?
Everyone, what else are you? While we start talking about some of the history of the Sazerac, I would love to hear how you all are making your Sazeracs at home. What are you using?
Yep.
Are you using rye? Are you using brandy? Are you doing a split base? What whiskeys are you using? What brandies are you using? And are you a drop the peel or not drop the peel?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one for me. I don't know if you caught that little remark at the end of last week's. If you were on last week when Karen Grill was here, she kind of nudged me with my lemon in the cup. But yeah, I mean it's one of those hotly contested bartender things. Anyways, the Sazerac goes way past last week's little snide remark about the lemon peel. Really dating back to the original cocktail, as this is a variation on the theme of the original cocktail, which is what we all now know as the whiskey old fashioned. And it actually started life as a cognac brandy drink. The name Sazerac actually comes from a specific bottling of brandy cognac called Sazerac. What was it? It was Sazerac Iffy, I guess. But it was actually imported into New Orleans by a bar owner out there, a gentleman named Sewell Taylor. And this drink, I mean, it's obviously with drinking history, you're never going to get exact dates. You know, things are going to be more of a feel of the story than what it actually is. And I mean, the reason for that obviously is that we drink, you know, and then the next day we try to remember what was going on. So it's generally attributed to the middle of the 1800s. So we just kind of pick an arbitrary date of 1850 as when the Sazerac was first invented. But it's like I said, nowadays it goes into a category that's just a slight offshoot from the whiskey old fashioned, which is the improved whiskey cocktail or the improved cocktail, which adds absinthe. The modern day improved whiskey cocktail actually has another element of cherry liqueur in there, but the whole idea of the improvement was that it had absinthe in it. And the 1800s were actually the explosion of absinthe, and right before it actually became illegal in both France and obviously here in the U.S. And so this is a very local version of a whiskey old fashioned. And I say that because in today's idea of like locality, we get really excited when we get to drink or eat local, right? Like, oh, I support local businesses, local beer, local breweries, what have you. Kind of a novel concept now because of all these big box stores and warehouses and modern distribution. But back in the day, that's how you drank. You drank local. So whatever was able to be imported locally. New Orleans was a port town and a very bustling port town at that in the 1800s. And it was one of those really unique areas in the States that was actually a huge melting pot of all these different cultures. There was obviously, pretty much everybody. There was French, there was Creole, there was Spanish, there was a big Italian contingent. Obviously, you have white colonies that would come down to Louisiana even before the Louisiana Purchase. So there's just this big melting pot of people, And obviously, back then you can't whitewash over it. There was a big slave trade that came through Louisiana, once again through the port there, as in a huge slave auction that was actually really close to where the Sazerac was invented. So that's part of this history, and it shouldn't be whitewashed over. But yeah, so this is obviously born in New Orleans, a very hyper-local cocktail, because it used a brandy that was imported directly into New Orleans from France, and it was using a very specific bitter that was made by an apothecary, a Creole apothecary named Antoine Amadi Péchot, yep, who had an apothecary shop there in the Rue Cré, the French Quarter, and so the cocktail was born at this bar that changed hands numerous times. Really, I guess it's like its first iteration of the Sazerac house was as the Sazerac Coffee House when it was owned and operated by Aaron Bird, not Aaron Burr, very close. He didn't assassinate a former leader of the U.S. like Aaron Burr did. Instead, he created this really fantastic drink, and then it changed hands. The bar changed hands a few times until it got to what was his name? I can't remember his name now.
Something Hardy? Was it
Yeah,
Hardy?
Thomas Hardy, I think was his name. But he ended up Thomas Hardy. So he had a very American, early colony American name,
Yeah,
Thomas Hardy. But he ended up buying the bar off of whoever was buying it or running it after Aaron Bird. And he was actually the first one to write down the ingredients, the recipe for this cocktail. And as he wrote it down, it appeared in its first publication, which was Bill Cocktail Boothby, William Boothby's World's Drinks and How to Mix Them, which was attributed to 1908, 1912, somewhere around there, was the first edition. And so that was the first time this really showed up in a national or international print, but it had been obviously the drink of New Orleans prior to that. There is a Sazerac Bar in New Orleans in the Roosevelt Hotel. That is not where the birth of the Sazerac was invented. There's also a Sazerac House, which is a couple blocks away from the historic location of the original bar, the Sazerac Coffee House, which actually now is a working distillery, and they actually have a rad museum in there that opened up a couple years ago. I haven't been able to check it out because of COVID, but I am looking forward to getting down there, especially. But that's a little history on the Sazerac, a very unique version of an improved whiskey cocktail. There's no rock sitting here. It's one of the only cocktails in the compendium that actually is in a rocks glass without rocks, which is why it's so important that you chill every piece of glass that's used in this cocktail, because you're only going to get it as cold as that first sip. It's not going to stay cold. It's going to start heating up. You'll still get that beautiful perspiration from all that absinthe that's sitting on the. There's a lot of oils from the botanicals in the absinthe, so it'll still kind of look chilled even when it's not. But yeah, it's absolutely one of my favorite cocktails, and I think we were talking about possibly getting somebody else on who might have been inspired or maybe spent some time in New Orleans. But New Orleans is such a magical place for me as a bartender over 20 years that I absolutely wanted to be on this week. We could have probably found somebody else, and I could have taken the week off, but I didn't want to.
You've
because
had a
it's
lot more
Sazerac.
experience with New Orleans than I have, and I think that
Right.
you're allowed to talk about it.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Not from New Orleans, I'm from San Francisco, but I up until COVID, I would spend 2 weeks a year in New Orleans. Once in July, in the hottest moments of Louisiana's oven of a summer, for a big bar convention called Tales of the Cocktail that has thousands of bartenders that kind of divulge on this town like its hottest point when it's cheapest. Basically, bartenders don't like to pay full price. But then I usually go back around this time of year, January, February, March, when it's a lot cooler. It's actually, sometimes it's really cold, kind of snappy cold. But just to experience the town without all that, that kind of convention feel. It was something I maybe explained to you, is that it would prevent my burnout. It's really easy to burn out when you're bartending, week after week, 6 days a week in a well, just getting crushed. And you start to lose what you love about the industry, and you start to lose what you love about making cocktails and what got you excited about it in the first place. And there's no better place in this earth, really, to kind of feel connected with cocktail culture than New Orleans. It really was the birthplace of most of the iconic cocktails, if not directly, then indirectly. But the Sazerac, the Ramus, the Julep, the Hurricane. There's so many drinks that came out of that region, and it's seminal for cocktail enthusiasts to go down there, especially in the Vieux Carré in the French Quarter, because like it's also kind of a time capsule. It hasn't really evolved much. It's a very unique place on Earth, especially for the U.S., where we like to bulldoze our past. The French Quarter is really pretty much intact. It's still cobblestone streets. There's still streets that you can't really get a car through. A lot of the old bars are still there. The Absinthe House, the Mandarin House, the original Sazerac House isn't there anymore, but there's a beautiful new one right on Canal Street. So, and then you've got the bars like the Roosevelt Room, which is kind of celebrates the Ramus and the Sazerac Room rather in the Roosevelt Hotel. So there's just all this drinking history there, and it really, you go down there and you get away from Bourbon Street, and you really not only get all that beautiful jazz and all the culture and the food, but you also get this just real like deep rooted connection to American cocktail.
I have a question. Is anyone here on this stream tuning in from New Orleans or from Louisiana, or is anyone from or has spent time living in New Orleans?
If you're in there right now, we'll give you the address here at the Cocktail Journey, because I absolutely need my king cake. It's something I haven't been able to have this year, so it's king cake season.
Quick note, the English literature person in me didn't sit well with the Thomas Hardy reference, because he is a very famous English literature writer and poet. So I looked it up. It's Thomas Handy.
Handy, not Hardy.
Handy, not to be confused with Hardy.
Don't take a word that I have to say as Bible.
Oh, I was the one that proposed it. I was like, I think I've read that.
But
I made that literature slip.
So it started life as a brandy cognac cocktail, right? And when did it switch, right? So a lot of our favorite whiskey cocktails actually started life as a brandy or gin cocktail. Those are really the cocktail ingredients historically. At some point, I guess when Mr. Handy took over the bar, right around that time there was this really crazy famine in basically all of the southern Europe, but all the winemaking regions of Europe. Most notably France. France got hit extremely hard by this bug that eats the grape plants and just kind of decimated the vineyards there, and wine production plummeted. So it was really hard to get really good high-end French wine, even in Paris, to the extent that right around this time is when absinthe culture really bloomed in Paris. The Parisians were like, okay, we can't get our hands on really good wine. The wine they're very interested in French culture there. So the wine from Italy and Spain wouldn't cut it for them. So they just started drinking more absinthe. And the absinthe bars were very close to the opium dens. So there was a lot of crossover there. So you can kind of see where a lot of this like, oh, absinthe's no good. You start seeing things can start to materialize from. But it was the same problem with brandy and cognac. Very hard to produce, a wine distillate if you couldn't get hold of the wine. So it started to become very hard to get in the States. And right around that time, they were starting to see some bourbon that was starting to show up in the south of the States. But for the most part, whiskey in the U.S. was rye-based. So rye whiskey, it was switched out for rye whiskey right around that time in the 1860s, 70s. So it was a pretty special thing. Very unique cocktail, seminal for sure. I mean, this is one of those ones that if you're taking the full journey, that I'm glad we started. It was like week 3 with the Sazerac.
Yeah, it's a fantastic place to start. And if you were here with us last week, we talked about the martini cocktail as being a super versatile, really basic recipe that you could slice and dice it in almost a million ways. And the Sazerac is a bit more of a specific cocktail. I think there's still lots of room for play, but Sazerac purists will have a very specific way of making this drink, and so it's interesting to talk about that and the fact that it is such a place-based drink and it has that history.
Yeah.
Unlike some of these older like spirit plus vermouth.
Right.
Like where does that come from? Who even knows? Where does this come from? New Orleans.
This is the most iconic bittered sling, variation, right? Bittered sling being the cocktail, that magic, 4 ingredients of spirit, water, sugar, and bitters. And it's very it's a hyper local New Orleans staple. And there's so many cocktails that if it doesn't have the name of the city in the actual name of the cocktail, you'd probably be like, I don't know where that came from, right? But the Sazerac's iconic, not only because of the Sazerac, name in the where it comes from in Peychaud's and back when absinthe started becoming illegal here in the States, we obviously had to change the cocktail again. It was changed from brandy to rye, and then it had to change from absinthe to herb saint. Herb saint, once again, being super local, it's a liqueur that's made in New Orleans. Obviously, you can use other, they call them pastis, but other like anise liqueurs, such as Pernod. Pernod makes a really fantastic one. Ricard is also a pastis that works really well. But what we'd see until 2007, when it became legal to sell and use absinthe again, was herb saint kind of being that change, and it would obviously change the flavor of the drink too, because it was a liqueur as opposed to a really high proof spirit, so that changed the flavor once again. But pastis and herb saint is basically absinthe without the wormwood, which was the ingredient that became illegal to use in spirits until 2007.
Yeah, like really recently.
Yeah.
And you'll find that I think it's very acceptable to use either absinthe or herb saint in your Sazerac. And in fact, because there was such a long history of using herb saint, it's
That's
very, very
classic.
commonly used and more classically used because for almost 100 years, you just couldn't get absinthe. Right? It's 80, 90 years or so. I'm exaggerating, but
it was a longer span of time that you couldn't use absinthe in this cocktail than you have. So
people were born and they died before absinthe came back.
Right. Well, I mean, if this drink really had its beginnings in the 1850s, by 1912 it was illegal to sell and drink absinthe. So what's that? 62 years, whatever. Like say if it was invented in exactly 1850, which I doubt. I think we just picked a date there, But and then it's only been legal since 2007. So yeah, I think there's been as much time where it's been herb saint as the rinse as it was. So they're interchangeable. And since absinthe was legal again, this became the official drink of New Orleans, right? 2008.
Oh yeah, and we love that little bit of that tidbit. I think the Louisiana House of Representatives, a bill was brought before them to actually make it the official drink of Louisiana in early 2008. Unfortunately, that bill was defeated, but then they reconsidered and they said, "Why are we doing this?" And so they debated about it, and then in June of 2008, the Louisiana legislature agreed to proclaim it the official drink or the official cocktail of New Orleans. So very much place-based in that way too.
Do you think there was a couple other parishes outside of New Orleans was like, no, it's the hurricane or whatever,
Probably. So we've heard from some of you, and I just want to share some of your comments with Stefan because I've been reading them. Yeah. So a few of them are. John said, the recipe card didn't tell me to exclaim Sazerac during the glass coating.
Sorry, I left that out. It's just, it's like a colloquial thing you do at some bars in New Orleans. But to make a proper Sazerac and put it on your menu at a bar, there is like a enthusiast club that will go around and put the seal of approval on your Sazerac. If you haven't been approved by the Sazerac committee or whatever.
10 points to whoever knows what this secret,
Yeah, then you can't call it a Sazerac
Society is.
I don't know. There's a whole thing.
They'll come and they'll judge your, they'll
as they should.
They'll secret shop your bar in New Orleans to see if you're making the Sazerac right.
I mean, if you're not making the Pisco punch correctly in San Francisco, you should be ran out of town. But that's one of our only claims to fame. That and the Irish coffee. Yeah.
So if I had read John's comment earlier, he gave us the clue because he's drinking Thomas Handy Sazerac rye in his Sazerac,
which is named after the guy. Yeah, there it is. I don't know why I would forget that because that is a great whiskey.
Diane is using Whistle Pig Piggyback and Courvoisier.
Dude, the Courvoisier. Yeah, there you go. That's nice. We
were talking about that earlier. It's a sweeter.
Well, all cognac
right?
is dosaged in some way. They add some caramel. It's part of the process.
Can you explain the word dosage?
Yeah, they add caramel. It's like food grade caramel that just basically gives it its color, but it does change the Brix levels ever so slightly.
Can you explain Brix levels?
The Brix level, sugar content.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay.
It's just a term that we use. It's a way to test how sugary something is. Brix is the like if it's 74 degrees Fahrenheit, it's 15 bricks.
Okay.
That's how
So,
it's called.
Diane, let us know in the comments, how does it taste, and how's the sweetness level for you? And are you
I
someone
think-
who likes sweeter cocktails or drier cocktails?
I haven't had the 50-50 in a really long time on the Sazerac.
The rye would dry it out.
The rye definitely dries it out and makes it spicier. But this is really good, actually. And I was kind of like, I don't know about the cognac because of the dosaging. Because when you get into like rums, the dosage then gets out of control. But a lot of the cognacs are kind of really mellow on the sugar level. But I actually really like what it's doing here. Kind of adding, both. You got a little bit of that rye spice and bite, but then you have like that really like smooth edged cognac. I'm gonna need to make you one, Sean.
Please.
We need to get her done. We got any other questions or comments?
Yeah, you get the Sean. Stefan's gonna make one for Sean, and I'll keep looking at some of these comments. So, John, who's using the Thomas Handy Thomas E. Handy Sazerac Rye, is also using Peychaud's barrel-aged bitters.
Oh,
Ooh,
okay.
special.
There you go. You're mixing it up.
That sounds great.
Should we go backhanded?
Yeah. Virgin is using Wild Turkey Rye 101.
So good. That
And-
makes an excellent Sazerac.
Violet
Please,
Crown
don't
Emerald Absinthe.
Hmm.
And Peychaud's. He says it's a very interesting taste. Daniel said, or Christina said, how is the Violet Crown? And he said, it's good, but it's strong.
Hmm.
I drink the rinse.
Oh yeah, so did
That's
I.
what I do.
Yeah. You got to drink the rinse.
I love absinthe.
That's the best thing about being able to make your cocktails at home, right?
Yeah, of course. Let's see. We've got Diane says Sazerac's one of my favorites. I drink them often. This is the best one I've ever made. I like the cognac with the rye. I've never made it that way.
I'm
Nice
glad
to
that
know.
maybe we started a trend today.
Yeah, split base.
I love it.
I didn't learn about the term split base until it was like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, who was the
I don't remember.
was it the Death and Company book that did the split base, the Mr. Potato Head, the I can't remember the
Oh
other
yeah,
two.
that makes
Yeah.
sense.
I think I think that they were the ones that like first wrote it in a book, like those 4 ways to like make your own cocktail basically. Like take a classic and either split the base or Mr. Potato Head out an ingredient.
Mr. Potato Head.
Yeah.
So
I
with-
can't remember the other
with-
2. I don't know why I'm spacing on the other 2.
with 3 ounces of spirit as your base, you've got some room to play in there for really seeing how it feels with one versus the other, or a split base.
Yeah, and that's something. The 3 ounce rule, right? That's something that I would teach my bartenders that trick. That the Sazerac gets more booze. I don't know why. It needs it. It needs the extra booze.
It's a boozy cocktail.
If you've ever been in New Orleans, it's a drinking time. But to balance it right, you kind of need that extra booze. Does anybody have a favorite bar in New Orleans? If you've been in New Orleans,
Yeah, let us know.
I'll give you a couple of mine.
What else we got? We have. I don't like sweet. Diane says she doesn't like sweet cocktails. She just put in a touch less simple syrup. And
Yeah,
I think in our recipe we said 1/8 to 1/4 ounce, and that's where you can play with your sugar levels, and based on whether you're using, a brandy or a bourbon versus a rye, you might want to adjust that. John's using Pierre Ferrand 1840 cognac. Oh, it's
That's
very nice.
so good.
And less sweet.
Yep. That's a great cognac. Sazerac!
My new band is called Split Base Bricks.
I love it. That's a cool band name. Cool band name, bro.
Oh, Split Base Bricks.
Progressive funk. No, it's New Orleans jazz. There you go.
And John says, I used to love Bar Tonique.
It's a great bar. Don't used to love it. You still have to
You
love it.
still love it. And John says, Nola Walls of Frozen Daiquiris is his memory there.
Bourbon Street.
So we had a question earlier that I want to make sure I get back to, which is, please discuss the difference in using rich simple syrup 2-to-1
Yes.
versus standard.
Perfect.
In
Yeah,
the
that's
Sazerac.
a great question.
But also other cocktails.
I just threw the lemon in. Sorry.
We make
Sorry,
it
not
both
sorry.
ways here.
Sorry, not sorry.
Both ways, we're not snobs.
Okay, cool. So, using rich simple, that's a really great question, right? So, if you're making a daiquiri, I highly recommend. If you're making a daiquiri, I highly recommend using, a 1-to-1 ratio syrup or a sour or anything like that. Something that is going to get a lot of dilution. When you shake a cocktail, you get 30 to 35% dilution ratio. So that's most of the cocktail, if you put it that way. So you're fine using a 1-to-1 ratio syrup because you're already going to dilute that drink way more than a Sazerac. Now, a stirred cocktail, generally, this isn't like always the rule. It's not as hard of a rule of like you generally shake every cocktail that has citrus and you generally stir every cocktail that doesn't. There's like a couple variables there, but pretty much that's a tried and true method to understand which way to dilute your cocktail. But when it comes to syrup, you have to understand there is water content there. So if you're trying to control dilution, which you generally need to do when you're stirring a cocktail, because it's an archaic way to do it. We've discussed this a couple times on stirred cocktails already, right? With the martini last week and the old fashioned. But if you weren't on that call, it's great to talk about, right? Stirring a cocktail isn't the most efficient way to chill or dilute your drink. But it's the best if you're looking for a really clean, clear, zero aerated cocktail, right? You want that really smooth, experience on your palate, right? You don't want all that aeration. You don't want a bunch of sugar like chewing, which is why we make the syrup ahead of time. So you want to really control how much water you're putting in this cocktail, and one way to do it is to start with a syrup that has less sugar. So the 2-to-1 ratio will help you take off another element of the whole situation, so you can really just concentrate on this portion of the dilution, right? Because we're using a higher ABV whiskey or cognac, although cognacs now are more in the 80 to 85 proof. Back in the day, they were right around 95 to 100. And then most of the, like, if you look at the 15-bottle bar or the original, the 5-bottle bar, we try to talk about using a 90 to 100 proof whiskey because you're going to add water. If you start with with watered down whiskey and you add more water to it, you're barely going to.
If you're going to use, 2-to-1 simple syrup is also just more sweet by volume.
Right.
So
yeah,
if you're
totally.
using,
so you can use less.
Mm-hmm.
So if the recipe calls for a half ounce of syrup, then you would knock it down to a quarter. And if the recipe called for a quarter ounce, you would go down to 1/8, right? The bar spoon.
Mm-hmm. Oh, a note on that. I think I got this question after one of our other live streams in terms of bar spoons and the standard measurement for a bar spoon. There's actually not a standard measurement for a bar spoon.
No. They're all different.
I think that when you look at a recipe that calls for a bar spoon of something, it's typically talking about somewhere between an eighth or a teaspoon, which is not exact. Those aren't the same measurements.
It's funny because bartending's old, right? It's like it predates gram scales and modern culinary, right? If you look at some of the original bar books, like Boothby's book, they aren't even talking about ounces. They're talking about claret glasses is what it is. They're wine goblets is what they call them, but they're claret glasses, which are kind of smaller wine glasses that you would drink out of when you were in the 1800s. So they didn't even have modern equipment like this, right? Or
a wine glass full of this is what they would say.
Yeah, they would say wine glass, which is roughly 2 ounces. Back then with these little claret glasses, you can
they
still
would fill it
find
all the way
them
to the top. They wouldn't do the 1/3
generally,
full giant glass.
And then if you go way back on some of the cocktails, like the whiskey cocktail, they would tell you to put a sugar cube and a couple of bitters, and then you hand them the glass with the sugar cube and the bitters, then you just hand them the bottle and let the guest put. Could you imagine now, the bartender being like, "All right, here's your bitters and sugar, and just however much Rittenhouse you want to put in your cocktails."
I like it real dry.
Yeah, it's totally fine if you use 8 ounces because we don't care about our our bottom line.
One of the things I wanted to mention, though, for those of you who are coming from sort of our standard spoon audience, is that we actually standardized the measurement for our bar spoon. And so if you have one of these or one of our Wingman spoons, if you fill this spoon up to the top of like the line, including the meniscus, it's pretty much exactly 1/8 of an ounce. So that's a handy little measurement to know. If you didn't know that about your Aero spoon, now you do. You're welcome.
I'll tell you, that is a light years improvement off of every other bar spoon I've ever. Because even if you just went on to .com, I won't mention which. I think we all know the website we're talking about. I love Greg Boehm, by the way. If he's watching or if he's watching later, he's a great guy. Freaking love him. But like even in like the different runs of that equipment, there's slight variations, and I've experienced this, and most people I think have. Bartenders get a little frustrated when their jiggers aren't like proper, and like if you use the same jigger forever and it breaks, like they actually do, like if you have the bells or the Japanese ones that like in the middle will snap, and like it's in a shift, it's like when you like travel the world with your jigger and you're like no, and then you pick up a new one, and it's literally not the same like volume. It's like really upsetting, but yeah, like it's actually really rad that they were able to.
I promise, this is not a standard spoon barber pitch, but
it's not. No, but coming from a bartender that has used a bar spoon that's ginormous and a bar spoon that's tiny, like it's great to know that they actually even thought about that. Like, maybe their runs are slightly, like small, fractions of a gram off, but they actually thought about that. That's pretty cool.
Meniscus was Split Bass Bricks' best album.
Y'all understand the meniscus technique, right? That's something to go over too if you're making cocktails at home. I was just on a call with the owner of the coffee liqueur brand I pitch.
Can we see the bottle?
You guys, have you ever experienced Mr. Black coffee liqueur? Like, it's so good. We're from Australia, really great coffee. Anyways, we were on a call earlier. He's in Australia because we're based out of Sydney. And so he has a really fantastic accent, and he has this great Australian dry way of explaining something that's so basic and amazing that you just don't even think of it. And like I've been doing all these YouTube videos, and they get a little heady, and I don't know if you've experienced this while I'm talking, that I get a little over the top, but
I try to break it down for you.
Yeah, but like he was just like, think of it like the average viewer is, and not you guys, because you guys are all enthusiasts and you're really passionate, and I love. This is way more. But I put out a video and like 2 people comment, and the Standard Spoon cocktails journey people, they're like super interactive and awesome. But yeah, he's like, yeah, just expect people to struggle making a rum and coke. Like think of that, and they're like, oh, geez, I'm really over going
You're
over.
Really going.
But
we've got some pretty sophisticated.
But this is really
practitioners
good.
in our audience, though.
Totally, but I'll tell you what, like I have to retrain my bartenders
Here,
all the time on this. Yeah, if you can, I don't know if we can put it up on a.
If you want to get closer, you can.
How close can you get?
About a foot.
Oh, there you go.
About a foot.
Like here? That's good.
Hold on. Let me just get closer. Everyone, wait a second.
Everybody,
cool.
wait a second. We're gonna explain something real quick.
John Schmid said, I use Small Hand Foods gum syrup for the
So
sweet.
good. That's a 2 to 1. Yeah, the legend who owns that company had the best bar in the Bay Area for about 6 months before they shut her down.
Yeah,
she's incredible.
Yeah, it's a fantastic brand. We have her stuff in our bar all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that viscosity, the gum syrup, that gum component.
Yeah, that just
really
adds
lovely.
one extra dimension, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, gum acacia.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't move it, it'll stay just like this.
Ooh, you just locked it, huh? All right, cool. So the meniscus, right? So most people, and mostly my bartenders included, will, I don't know, you can't see it right now because we have not poured to the meniscus. It's just slightly under the top of this jigger. What that is that's not 2 ounces. That's like 1 ounce and 3/4 or whatever. What you really want is you want it. There's this property about water, right? I don't know if you can see yeah, you can kind of see it, kind of the surface retention, right? There's this there's this whole idea. Was that?
Yeah.
I can go a little more.
And technically, with this jigger, 2 ounces is at the place where like the color goes. But this would be your 2 1/4 or 2 and.
Okay, well,
quarter, yeah.
They know their jiggers better than me, but if you
this
have
is
this
a
jigger,
meniscus illustration.
if you have
here.
this jigger, now we're at like 2 1/4. But if you have a standard American jigger, a Japanese jigger, or a Bell jigger, we're now at 2 ounces. But this is the whole idea of meniscus. The meniscus is, we're talking about the property of water that retains surface retention. So that is actually to the meniscus of this jigger. So that's something to keep in mind. I see my bartenders underpouring all the time, and I have to remind them. And part of it is we have this perfectly stable on the back end of a julep cup. So this is perfectly level. But when you're bartending, you tend to have, where's your other jiggers? I know we have them. Let's pretend the absinthe rinser that I couldn't find earlier is your jigger, right? Like this is like it's hard when you're bartending to hold it exactly flushly straight, right? Like you don't have a whatever that's called. So you're always kind of like but if you do that and you're pouring through the meniscus, you're going to pour out, right? So you have to keep that in mind. So getting an accurate. It doesn't have to be perfectly flawless. You're not putting it on a grand scale, but you should keep all that stuff in mind. It'll make your drinks at home way better.
All right, we're back on simple syrup again.
I love it.
One is, so Carl says that the volume of rich simple syrup to simple syrup, rich simple syrup is only 1.33 times sweeter than regular simple syrup.
You're right. Yeah.
He's like, I'm calling BS on you. No offense, Stefan.
No, it's okay. Scientifically, you are absolutely correct. Yes.
Because of Carl, what's the science word? It's the suspension of the sugar in the I don't know, whatever it is. It's the volume.
Right.
And when we're talking about volume too, we're talking about 1 to 1 or 2 to 1. We're talking about weight.
Right.
By weight, not by like volumetric measurements, right?
Well, you get in trouble, right, when you're trying to make a
tricky.
syrup. Mm-hmm. When you have one ingredient, if you're taking a simple syrup, right, that's 2 ingredients. One ingredient is in solid form, right, your sugar crystals, and one is in a liquid form. So they have different density,
Densities. Thank
you. You have to be careful there. Now, when you're making drinks at home, generally eyeballing, equal parts by volume will be semi-okay. But if you're bartending at a volume bar or somewhere that, or even a cocktail bar that more precision is necessary, you have to keep that stuff in mind. And there's a better way to do that, which is by weighing it, which is still not perfect. And I'm sure scientists would teach you a way better way to do it. But it's way more accurate than just eyeballing a volume. When one of sugar if you put sugar in a glass in like a mix, like a Pyrex beak or whatever, there's a whole lot of sugar in there, but there's also a lot of air in between all the sugar crystals, whereas there's way less air in the water that you're adding. So.
Mm-hmm. And then another question is, does rich simple syrup keep longer than simple syrup?
Theoretically, yes, but if you're in New Orleans in July, both of them aren't going to last very long. I mean, it's so stable that I generally don't even refrigerate my rich simple. It takes a pretty long while, about a month, for it to grow anything.
I actually add like a half an ounce of vodka.
Yep, that'll work too.
Keeps it from getting any.
Or really any spirit
Alcohol
if you want like
kills
sort
everything.
of a flavored version. Like we used to do it with a nice rum for our like rum cocktails, right? And so you can add a little bit of a spirit to your simple syrup if you're really concerned about it.
I have a question actually. Do you ever make syrups using booze? Like I've done rich simple syrup using whiskey.
Yeah. It's harder. It's hard to do that, right? Because it's way harder to dissolve sugars into alcohol. Because alcohol is a sugar. There's only so much sugar you can add.
Water and a little bit of water, and then mix it with the alcohol.
Yeah, we would do it a lot with like champagne, or we would sweeten like a Fino sherry or something to have it last a little longer. So there's always, every bartender has gotten excited and gone into the lab and worked on like a champagne syrup or whatever, for sure. But that's the fun thing. Like simple syrup, we call it simple syrup because it's just the 2 ingredients, but you can have a whole lot of fun jamming flavor into a sugar water solution. And I don't know, how much time do we have?
We've got we're at that like 45 minute to an hour mark.
I just want everybody to go, like mentally go to New Orleans. I think we all need to just jump on a mental plane right now and like go to the French Quarter. If you've ever experienced it, you have it in your brain. If you haven't, let me set the picture for you, which is, pretty much all these buildings were built in the 1800s. A lot of different styles. Every street in the French Quarter is both named by its Spanish name and its French name. So you have both of those options there because it was a French-heavy spot for a while, and this Spanish kind of colonized. And the Italians are there, the Creoles are there. You're walking by the streets. If you're on Rampart or Royale Street, especially, and maybe you have a Sazerac in your hand and you have it in a plastic to-go cup because you're able to do that when it's not COVID. Right now, actually, I think the open drinking laws here in California are easier than Bourbon Street. But generally, if you go to a bar in New Orleans, there's a little shelf by the front door that just has a bunch of empty glassware in it and a big stack of plastic cups, because you can order a drink, have as much as you want at the bar, and then pour it into a to-go cup, leave it there for the staff to take care of the empty glass, and you can just walk out the bar and have a great time, right? So you're walking down Royale Street and you're walking past all these little shops with artists and musicians playing on the street, and then you've got these beautiful Creole cottages, right, that are all duplexes, shotgun style, all super colorful and vibrant. Maybe it's this time of year, right? We're starting to gear up for a whole month worth of Mardi Gras, like leading up to Mardi Gras, and maybe you showed up on a day that it's the kids parade or it's the the LGBTQ parade. There's a different parade every day during Mardi Gras. It's not just that Fat Tuesday, like show me your beads thing. It's like there's a whole month. Everybody gets a parade. The kids get a parade. The dogs get a parade. It's just a party.
Chickens
forever.
get a parade.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe you're there for Halloween, which I've been in the Marigny, which is insane, and everybody opens up their doors and just allows everybody to walk in. It's just it's an experience, and it's one of those cities that's magical on so many different levels. Obviously for cocktails, and the Sazerac really celebrates all of that beautiful history. And it's something that every single time I sip on a Sazerac, I'm exactly transported to Royale Street. There's an apothecary museum there that kind of celebrates. I mean, not really Peychaud's apothecary, but that era. And it's actually across the street from I think one of the Omni or something, big hotel over there. That plot of land used to be the biggest slave auction house in the world. So there's just all this history, some of it good, some of it absolutely terrible, but it's so uniquely American that I think it's absolutely somewhere everybody should go experience. And if you haven't for a while, once this whole thing's over, definitely go back, order a Sazerac at your favorite bar. You know it's going to be good because they've all gone through the rating system.
Did anyone find out about the rating system? Like, what's that organization?
Yeah, I can't remember, but they actually have, it's a legitimate thing.
We're calling it the Sazerac Society until we...
It pretty much is.
The official name. Who is our researcher in the audience?
Oh, great bars, right? So there's definitely one of my favorite bars for sure is Bar Tonique, which is in right on the outskirts of the French Quarter, facing the park. It's beautiful. It's like most cocktail bars you think of in your head are like these big, opulent, beautiful bars, and the bartenders are wearing the tie and the suspenders and all that stuff, which I used to wear all the time. I still actually kind of pine for those days, but this bar makes the best Ramus, the best Sazerac, and it's just regular people wearing jeans and a t-shirt with a beard or whatever, just crushing it. I'll go there, and I used to know the guy that ran the bar, and every time you learn something. But the Bar Tonique by far is a fantastic bar. There's so many great ones. I can't but you get everything. You get Latitude 23, which is Jeff Barry's bar, which is one of the seminal modern tiki bars in the world. It was built by Jeff Beach Bum Barry, who basically rewrote modern tiki by spending years and years delving into the history of that genre. And then he finally built his bar in a beautiful hotel in the French Quarter. Highly recommend checking out Latitude 23. There's Canaan Table, which kind of coined the phrase proto-tiki, which was all the Caribbean drinks, the colonial drinks that really were based in in the history of here in our hemisphere. Great food as well. And then any trip to Canaan Table, you should walk down the street down to Frenchman in the Marigny, which is kind of the hipster kind of neighborhood, whatever. But that's where all the best little jazz clubs are. DBA is there. Right across the street is my favorite jazz bar in the world called the Spotted Cat. And like I can just be there right now. Like right now I can smell the food, I can hear the music, and I hope you all can too.
Yeah, for me it's the French 75. That's the first place I ever had a French 75 was in New Orleans.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Great bar.
It's such a great
cocktail.
Beautiful light cocktail.
Which was not actually one of the few cocktails that wasn't invented in New Orleans.
I know, but it's just like it was so good. For me, it just has that memory, and you know, of course, it's really.
But it wouldn't not have been invented if it wasn't for the drinks that came out of New Orleans.
Well, there you go.
Yep.
We're doing the French 75 at some point on the cocktail journey. I'm not sure exactly when.
It'll probably be like next month. That's a cocktail that should be early on.
Lovely.
In the
Oh,
journey.
champagne cocktails.
We should talk about Peychaud's, right? Like Peychaud's.
We should actually. Peychaud's, and what do you guys want to talk about? Peychaud's or absinthe? We've got we can do both.
I feel like we covered absinthe, kind of. I don't know. What's the 3 main ingredients in absinthe? Does anybody know?
Quiz
time. I didn't even discuss it, so.
No, we
Other
didn't.
than wormwood, I mentioned wormwood. What's the other 2? While we talk about that, Peychaud's, right? Obviously, the Sazerac is the seminal cocktail for the Peychaud's because it was really the way to sell Peychaud's. It was the way that, I mean, the originator of Peychaud's, it was like the house cure-all from this apothecary shop. So back when you would go to the apothecary shop instead of, your local doctor and, your whatever what do you call it,
whatever your ailments were.
Yeah, like whatever you had, you would go to the apothecary, and then they also had a soda fountain in there too. So you could get your soda, you could get your medication, you could get your contraception, which was really scary at the time. Yeah, you could do it all, and there was actually at the apothecary shop they would have these beautiful like glass globes that would have water in them, and then the water would be colored depending on what was going on. So if like everything was fine and there was no issues, there was no epidemic on, it would be like a certain color, and then if like cholera was running rampant, it would be red or whatever it was. And like if you see the red globes, you're like, shoot, I need to go get my medication, I need to get my herbs, or whatever it was. Yeah, it was like a way to like explain to people real quick using without having, because not everybody was literate at the time, like not everybody had learned to read and write, so it was an easy way to be like, oh shoot, the globes are red, something's going on,
Better go get my tonic.
Yeah, so it was one of those like cure-alls, bitters. You like started life as a cure-all for everything back before we realized that alcohol wasn't. I mean, it cures lots of things, but it doesn't really cure your ailments. Not your physical ones, at least. So that was kind of how it started, and obviously the Sazerac being like the hyper-local whiskey cocktail for New Orleans, that was kind of where it got its claim to fame. But there are a few other cocktails that are like a seminal thing. You can make a really mean, Queen's Park Swizzle with one of these guys. I'm trying to remember the other cocktail that like I just like lost it now. There's another like pretty famous cocktail. Is
it a cobbler?
It's not a cobbler actually.
Which one is it?
The Seelbach. The Seelbach is a classic Peychaud's cocktail. We'll have to do it at some point. But yeah, really good stuff. It's basically a champagne cocktail with Peychaud's bitters and a little Cointreau and bourbon. Really fantastic. We'll have to cover it on the cocktail journey for sure. But yeah, this is a different. It's another aromatic bitters in the vein of absinthe, of Angostura, but completely different. It's really more anisey than baking spicy. If you think, I don't know, the discerning note for me, they're both gentian based, so that's kind of the first thing you taste is the gentian root, which is really bitter. But also, whereas Angostura has like a kind of like island spice, cinnamon, clove, nutmeg vibe. This is really heavy on citrus peel, on anise, and I feel like there's one more. Like there's a little bit of mint in the background. It's really tasty, but it's more almost. It tastes more medicinal to me, and I think to most people. Cherry. There's actually some cherry bark in here that kind of gives that cherry vibe. It's changed over the years. Formulas love to change. It's part of the fun about bartending for 20 years. Is you're like, oh, that's different.
It's different now.
But it's the same thing-ish. It's got like all alcohol. It's bought, and another parent company buys that company, and everybody wants to change the recipe to be a little bit more profitable, but it's still quite delicious.
So a couple of questions. James says your drinks looked more reddish than ours. What contributes to the color? It could be
number one, how many dashes you put in. I think I may have covered it at the beginning, but recipes call for 3 to 4 dashes of Peychaud's. Two things have happened in my life. I've gotten older, so as you get older, your taste buds change. Generally, they get weaker, so you want to add more Peychaud's in to taste what you tasted when you were younger. Also, they have and Sazerac, the parent company, has not come out and said it publicly, but they have changed the ingredients, or at least.
He's sure of it.
I'm absolutely. It's not that I'm getting older. They have definitely weakened the dosage of.
It happens.
It happens. It's fine. And it was probably something that made it a better product in a more sustainable way going forward. But it has been changes, just as there always will be. It's a living, breathing thing, right? Like it's there's not a machine making this stuff. It's a distillate that's got all these infusions in it, and even the ingredients that are infused in there change over time, right? There's mutations, genetic mutations in the plants, because it's an aromatic bitters. There's lots of plants and extracts in here, so things just change. So yeah, where I used to put 3 to 4 dashes, I put 6 to 8 to 10.
There you go. That is probably the redder color.
But also like it depends, right? If you're pouring it, like if you've got a dasher cap on here, right? You want to adjust the thing. There's a dasher cap on here.
Get to work.
This is the smaller. What is the 5 fluid ounces? There's definitely like an 8 or 9 fluid ounce one that the dasher cap is a little bit bigger, like that little hole in the center. And then some people will take it, especially at bars, will take it from this, proprietary bottle, and then put it in something. You guys don't have one, but like a dasher bottle. And those bottles, they give you a very consistent dash, but it's way smaller than this hole. So you end up like, if the recipe calls for 2 dashes, you end up putting 6.
Calibrate your dasher bottles, people. Okay, Tom says for round 2, he swapped out the regular Peychaud's with barrel aged and Absinthe for Absinthe and dropped in the peel, and I like it much better. So there you go. You've converted a peel dropper.
I need to revisit the barrel aged Peychaud's. I bet you that's delicious.
And then we've got some guesses around Absinthe, which we've got 2 minutes left, and so anise and fennel.
Yep, that's right. That is traditional absinthe. French absinthe is the 3 main ingredients to be called absinthe: fennel, anise, and wormwood. Something like a Vert style has way more. So, really fun little thing. This is St. George's absinthe, which is an American absinthe based out of Alameda, California, which is right across the bay from San Francisco. Oh, wait a second. That's my hometown. Lance and the team here at St. George has created this amazing Vert style. Vert meaning green in French, which doesn't look green anymore, right? Actually, when this comes out of the not the still, but after they've macerated, it's bright, vibrant green, and then over time, as air and light hits it, it becomes more of this yellow color. But it's way more like this is traditional French absinthe. You can see the difference in color, which is funny because the yellow one's called green. But there's way more ingredients in here. St. George, fine brandy is the base, which is why it's also kind of darker because it's actually aged brandy. But there's, besides the 3 ingredients that you would normally find in there, you get star anise, which is actually different than anise, mint, lemon balm, hyssop, which is really spectacular in here, basil, tarragon, and stinging nettles, which is a fun little one. So there's a lot more going on here. It just changing your absinthe rinse out completely changes the flavor of the Sazerac. So.
And you totally, I recommend getting these little guys because you can play around with absinthes that sometimes are, $60, $80 a bottle.
But if you did, I think I may have mentioned this in the 15 bottle bar, but if you did spring for the full 375 or a full 750 milliliter of Pernod absinthe or something like that, there's other uses than just the very small amount of rinse in a Sazerac, right? You can lose your absinthe, just to drink it on its own. And if you did spend the money for Pernod, I wouldn't advise adding any sugar. I would just add some really cold water, so you can just take some really you can just leave water in a vessel with lots of ice and then just pour in. until it starts to luge, which means when you get this is what one. Of course, the one spot that's kind of
that's rubbed off.
Let's say it's
of our
120
label.
proof, right? I think it's 60-something percent. Absinthe comes at a very high proof, and you get this beautiful crystal clear green color. But as you add water, it will all the like oils from the plant matter that's in here, that's stuck in here, will actually start to precipitate out, which basically means it turns cloudy, like milky white. And that's when you've like luged it to enough to where you would drink it, sipping on it, as opposed to crushing absinthe and dying because it's basically alcohol poisoning. So that's kind of like where it is. Like when you hit that point of luge, where it precipitates out and turns like cloudy, that's when you know you've got absinthe ready to go. But I would highly recommend luging your absinthe with some crushed ice or broken ice, maybe even adding some into lemonade, which is really delicious. It's a patio pounder. It's super good.
Enjoy that stuff.
Or soda water. Yeah, so I highly recommend.
Mhm.
There's plenty of other uses for absinthe. Also, it's great just to kind of dab, like a little absinthe.
We were playing around with that last one.
Yep.
Last quick fact about absinthe is when it was finally allowed back in the U.S. market in 2007, Pernod was the first one to import it, but St. George had they had their absinthe ready to go, their American absinthe ready to go for what, like 4 years?
Yeah. Lance had already planned on releasing this product, and the only thing holding them back, I don't know if you can
Show us the
rack
label.
focus. Yeah, is the TTB here in the States are pretty serious about their labels on booze, which
The
is
people
why
that approve your labels.
Yeah, and they went back and forth on this label a few times because the monkey seemed too psychedelic. This is like the second or third bottling. It currently has a monkey playing the drums on a skull, but it used to have like a monkey, I think like Hamlet, like staring at the skull and pondering it, and that was like too psychedelic.
Oh,
But this is
Shakespeare's
fine.
too psychedelic. Okay.
Yeah, like Lance was really scratching his head of being like, somehow, like the one that they approved was way worse. But it took like 6 months back and forth with the TTB to come up with like a decent label for it. But yeah, they were the first American absinthe to come out after the ban was lifted.
Yeah, so we like them. They do some other really great spirits and
Their
liqueurs.
gins are insane.
All right, well, that is a wrap.
Oh,
Went a
okay.
little over. Thanks for coming in. Check out the comments. Yeah, taste your bitters. Taste your absinthe. Taste your ingredients by themselves. That's one of the things we love to do is like get a little bit and taste it. And how do you think this might feel in this cocktail? Enjoy your Sazeracs. Enjoy looking forward to next week, which is this guy's favorite, right?
It's the only one that's on my body.
How do you say it? in
Uh-oh.
Italian?
Negroni. Spagnato. Yeah, you can't see it.
Oh, we can't see it. We'll show you. We'll show you the chat next week.
Actually, the guest that we have next week has the same tattoo. Part of the Negroni Jabronis. Yeah.
These guys. Come back next week. We're going to do the Negroni. We have decided to just move to YouTube only, so come see us here. It's a little bit simpler, and now you can benefit from seeing all the good banter in the comments and the chatter. So we will see you next week. Have a great evening. If you choose to go round 2 or 3 with your Sazerac, make sure you're at home or you've got a driver.
Mask up.
Cheers. Turn up the music, Sean.
Okay.
It's a dance party.
Can you put some trombone shorty on?